Aristotle once said, the female is, as it were, a mutilated male. Yeah, let that sink in. All your life, you were told women were divine, warm, nurturing, full of love and light. You were taught that they feel deeper, love purer, heal better. That they were the answer to your chaos, the balm to your wounds. And you believed it. Because everyone around you did too. From your earliest memories, every story you were fed cast her as the angel, the muse, the mother, the one worth fighting for. She was the prize. And you? You were the chaser. The protector. The one who knelt. The one who offered himself just for a taste of closeness. But what if the story was never true? What if that ideal, that myth wasn't just wrong, but designed to keep you blind? What if women aren't angels? What if the woman you love isn't some missing piece of your soul, but a reflection of your own misunderstanding? See, Aristotle didn't dress this up in poetry. He didn't romanticize. He stripped away the fantasy and looked at nature raw, unfiltered, unapologetic. He saw what most refused to, not because he hated women, but because he refused to lie to himself. To him, it wasn't about morality. It was about form, function, biology. And nature? Nature doesn't lie. But this isn't about chromosomes or anatomy. This is about what happens when that truth hits the lies you've been living. What if love in its rawest form isn't mutual? What if it's hierarchy camouflaged as devotion? What if when you say, I'm in love, what you really mean is, I've placed my self-worth in someone else's hands? You think you see her, but you don't. You see the piece of you that's still aching to be healed. And she sees that. She sees your hunger, your yearning, your desperate need to be chosen. And maybe, just maybe, she mirrors it. You think she's nurturing? Maybe. Or maybe she's just echoing the version of her you crave because she knows that desire gives her leverage. You think she's soft? Look closer. That softness? It's a performance. Not always conscious. Not always calculated. But still, a performance. Because if Aristotle was right, then everything she does, everything she is shaped around what you need her to be. Not because she's weak. Not because she's fake. But because nature made her adaptive. Strategic. Emotionally agile. A shapeshifter. Because when you're not the default, when you're not the one in control, you learn to survive by bending. Bending to what the dominant form wants. And in a man's world, women bend. Not for love, for survival. So now when you look at her, ask yourself, what are you actually seeing? A person? Or a projection? A partner? Or a placeholder for your unresolved pain? You don't want her. You want the idea of her. The fantasy. And she knows that. That's her power. She doesn't have to dominate you. She just needs to reflect you. Reflect what you want, what you dream of, what you lack. And when she does that, when she nails the reflection, you fall. You don't fall in love. You fall into surrender. Not because she's powerful, but because you gave her power. You handed it to her willingly. Not because she's some divine force, but because you're lost. And once you've handed yourself over, once you've made her approval the currency of your worth, what's left of you? You think you're being romantic. You think you're giving. But you're not. You're bargaining. Trading your masculinity for validation. Hoping she'll look at you and finally say, you're enough. But what if she never meant to say that? What if she doesn't even see you? Only the version of you she can shape? Now here's the thing nobody says out loud because it's not nice and it's definitely not politically correct. She's not looking for truth. She's looking for advantage. Not out of cruelty, but out of design. While you speak in vulnerability, she listens in strategy. You pour out your past like it's sacred. She listens for patterns, for openings, for control points, for ways to gain influence, not because she's evil, but because she's responding to a world that never gave her structural power. When you don't have power out in the world, you learn to master it behind the scenes. Not with brute force, but with subtlety. You call her emotional. She's surgical. You think she's feeling deeply? No. She's spinning. Every smile, every pause, every flicker in your expression, she's registering it like code. Because she had to. She had to learn how to be indispensable to the very men who feared her difference. That's the brutal truth. You love? It's not love. It's dependency. And her love? It's not pain. It's calibration. She doesn't need to overpower you. She just needs to become essential. She becomes the voice in your head before you make a decision. The comfort you crave when life punches you in the gut. The approval you chase like it's oxygen. And you? You call that romance. But it's not. It's obedience wrapped in poetry. You thought you were building love, but what you were really building was dependency, one quiet compromise at a time. The trade felt noble at first, even heroic. You were giving, attentive, devoted. But look closer, you weren't offering love. You were making payments. Paying in vulnerability. hoping for affection, hoping that in exchange for your devotion she'd crown you worthy. But worth doesn't come from someone else's praise. It can't. Because as long as you need her to tell you you're enough, she owns you. Not because she wants to, but because you've handed her the keys. Here's the hard part, she might not even be aware of it. She's not scheming like a villain in a movie. She's just responding. Responding to your hunger, your uncertainty, your search for identity through her approval. And when she reflects it back to you, when she becomes the echo of what you most want to hear, you fall. You think it's love. But it's not. It's a loop. A self-feeding, emotionally codependent loop. You think she completes you? No. She completes the illusion. The performance. The act you've built around being enough. And every time she rewards it with affection, you sink deeper into a fantasy you're too scared to challenge. Because challenging it means facing yourself. It means realizing the pedestal you placed her on was never about her. It was about your need to outsource your value. You put her up there, and you crawl beneath it willingly. So when she pulls back, when her affection fades, when her warmth starts to cool, you panic. You chase. You plead. Not for her. For what she gave you. The feeling of being chosen. The feeling of being sane. But you were never really sane. You were Stan. Read like Toad. Not out of malice, but out of instinct. Survival. Because when you live in a world that doesn't center you, you learn to adapt. You learn to detect nuance, motive, silence. You learn to feel your way into power without ever grabbing it. That's not manipulation. That's adaptation. That's evolution. You think she's soft? She's strategic. You think she's nurturing? She's responsive. She doesn't overpower. She becomes essential. And the more you rely on her to feel okay, the more you hand her control and call it love. And then what? You disappear. Slowly, without realizing. Your edges dull. Your opinions shrink. You filter your truth, soften your voice, tiptoe around her moods. You call it respect. But it's fear. Fear of being unloved. Fear of disappointing her. Fear of losing the thing that made you feel whole. That's not love. That's submission. Not the poetic kind, the performative kind. And here's the twist, she knows it. She may not speak it. But she feels it. She sees how much you've given up in exchange for her warmth. And once she knows she owns your center, your mind, your need, her power is complete. Not by force, but by presence. And once she's the lens through which you view your value, you've already lost yourself. You want to be needed? She'll need you until she doesn't. You want to be irreplaceable? She'll make you feel that way until you're not. And when she leaves, you think she'd changed. But she didn't. She just stopped pretending. She stopped reflecting your fantasy. She stopped performing the version of herself that kept you emotionally compliant. And now you're not breathing love. You're breathing the self-image that depended on her approval. That's the real heartbreak. Not her absence, but the emptiness it reveals in you. You thought you were living her. But really, you were chasing the version of yourself she made you feel like. That's not love. That's identity outsourcing. And Aristotle? He wasn't vilifying women. He wasn't raging against the feminine. He was describing nature in its rawest form. Not with bitterness, just with clarity. And clarity is uncomfortable when it shatters comfort. He said the female is a mutilated male, not because she's lesser, but because nature doesn't care about emotional sensitivity. Nature observes form and function. Nature rewards adaptation, strategy, efficiency. And in a world where men build external systems, women mastered the internal. While you conquered land, they conquered attention. While you developed power, they developed influence. And where power can be seen, influence is invisible. You don't notice it until it owns you. So what does that mean for you? It means you have to stop waiting for a woman to validate you, to rescue you, to make you whole. Because if you're building your identity through her affection, then her silence becomes your collapse. Her coldness becomes your crisis. Her absence becomes your undoing. You think you're strong? Then act like it. Find yourself in the quiet. Rebuild your worth where no one else is looking. Because until you do, every woman you meet will become another mirror, another fantasy, another escape from the work you still haven't done. And when she sees that you're still orbiting her approval, she'll step right back into that role. Not because she's evil, but because you invited her to play it. You trained her to reward you. You trained her to withhold. You trained her to measure out love like rations in a war zone. And then you beg for more. But here's the brutal truth, she doesn't owe you love. She doesn't owe you validation. She doesn't owe you identity. Because the second you made her responsible for those things, you turned her into a villain. And no one survives worship. Not you. Not her. So where do you go from here? You go inward. You strip away the narrative. You drop the performance. You stop performing good man for the chance at affection. You reclaim the version of you that isn't shaped by your days. Because the real man? He doesn't kneel. He doesn't chase approval. He doesn't beg to be seen. He sees himself. He meets her eye to eye, not to conquer, not to obey, but to connect. Fully. Honestly. She may not want that. She might leave. She might miss the version of you that was easier to manage. Softer. More pliable. But if she does, let her go. Because the truth is, love without truth isn't love. It's a contract of illusion. And you've been signing those your whole life. Let this be the first moment you don't. Let this be the first time you don't hand over your identity for affection. Let this be the first time you stand in the fire of your own uncertainty without reaching for her hand to guide you through it. Because if you can survive that silence, the silence of your own self, then finally, you're free. Now you're standing there, without the fantasy, without the pedestal, without the crutch of her affection, and what's left? Silence. Not the quiet of peace, but the unsettling stillness that follows the collapse of something you thought was real. That silence is an emptiness. It's a mirror. It's asking, who are you without her? Not who you pretended to be. Not who she reflected back. Not who you became to be loved. But you. And the truth is, you don't know yet. That's okay. That's the beginning. Most men never get here. They build their lives around being needed. They hide behind usefulness. They confuse devotion with purpose. And when love becomes labor, when every moment with her feels like a job interview for your own worth, they call it commitment. But it's fear. Disguised. Polished. Sold as virtue. You've been afraid to be alone, not because of loneliness, but because aloneness strips away the mirrors. And when the mirrors are gone, there's no one left to project onto. No one to affirm. No one to impress. Just you. Wrong. Undistracted. That's when the real work begins. You have to unlearn the man you became to be chosen. That version was crafted carefully, subconsciously, to keep you safe. To earn smiles. To avoid rejection. To be the good guy. But good isn't the same as whole. And safe isn't the same as sane. Wholeness doesn't beg. It doesn't compromise itself to be palatable. It doesn't confuse surrender with self-erasure. Here's where it gets even harder. You might still love her. And part of you might still want to believe that if you just become better, more evolved, more masculine, more secure, she'll come back. She'll see you. She'll give you what you always hoped for. Stop. That's not healing. That's optimization for approval. It's still performance. Still orbiting her. You don't become whole so you can win her back. You become whole so that no one can own your sense of worth again. Because when you finally meet a woman from that place, not need, not emptiness, but wholeness, everything changes. You don't need her to complete you. You invite her to witness you. You don't seduce her with stability. You stand in your truth and let the chips fall. You don't manipulate her through affection or grand gestures. You offer presence. You offer clarity. You offer choice. And you recognize hers. Because a man in his truth doesn't fear her leaving. He respects her freedom. He doesn't try to control her with throwing or cage her with consistency. He shows up. Fully. And if she walks, he lets her go. Not because he's cold. Because he's rooted. This isn't about being alpha. Or sigma. Or whatever label makes insecure men feel powerful. It's not about dominance. It's about sovereignty. The masculine isn't control. It's containment. Stillness. Direction. Fire that doesn't burn to be seen, but to illuminate. And when you embody that, women don't own you. They meet you. Some might test you. Some might admire you. Some might leave. But none will define you. And that's the shift. You stop trying to win love and start living truth. You stop chasing validation and start building value. Not the kind of value that needs applause, but the kind that can sit in silence and not shrink. Because when you reach that point, when you no longer need her to tell you who you are, you become untouchable. Not hard. Not closed. Just anchored. That's when a woman can finally meet you. Not as your savior. Not as your prize. Not as your mirror. But as your equal.